No one? Excellent. Okay, so thank you very much for attending my talk. Before I actually get started, I just wanted to let you know that I was supposed to be doing a workshop yesterday, but no one signed up, so I was given the opportunity to do a talk. Therefore, this session is going to be constructed of two pieces. There's going to be a presentation part where I'm going to walk you through what I think about single-page applications with JavaScript. We'll talk about MarkLogic as well, and I'm going to do some live coding because I am brave enough to do that. Okay, so let me quickly introduce myself to you as well. So my name is Tamas, and I work for a company called MarkLogic, and I do technical training, which means that I teach people on how to use our database, how to write applications using our database, and I also do that in conferences by delivering various workshops. I tweet, so you can follow me on that Twitter handle, it's Piros, and I also write lots of blog posts about JavaScript and JavaScript-related frameworks and development on that address that you can see on the slide, tamas.io. So the first thing that we're going to discuss today is what is MarkLogic. So MarkLogic is an enterprise NoSQL database. Essentially, we are a document-based database system, and the reason why we call ourselves enterprise is because we have enterprise features. So even though we are a NoSQL company, we support ACID transactions, which is, as far as I know, the only NoSQL company who does that. And you can load in a bunch of documents into a database as well. So you can load in JSON documents, and we also have JavaScript features in the database, and I'm going to show that to you in just a second. So you can write JavaScript code to manipulate these JSON documents. If you load in XML documents and XML files, then we allow you to modify your content and to view your content using XQuery and XPath. If you're into semantics, we allow you to load in RDF triples, and then you can run SPARQL queries against these RDF triples. And you can also load in other types of binary files, such as images, PDF documents, videos, so on and so forth. And the power of MarkLogic is that you don't need to specify a data model. You can just take all these documents as they are and just load them into the database, and then you can start creating applications that makes use of them. We also have various APIs. So we have a REST API that allows you to manage your documents and manage your database as well. So via HTTP REST calls, you can create documents, delete documents, update documents in the database. You can also manage your indexes, manage the database settings, so on and so forth. This being a Java conference, I really have to mention that we have a Java API as well. So if you have a Java application, you can use our Java API to connect to the database and access the documents. And our latest addition in this API family, if you will, is the Node.js client API, which I'm going to talk about today. And there are some other features in MarkLogic that are quite interesting, and obviously I can't list all of them because I don't have that much screen estate here. But one of the most interesting features, in my opinion, is the relevancy ranked search. So every time when you do a query for a particular term in MarkLogic, we actually calculate a relevancy score for the documents, and then we list those documents according to the relevancy. So it's not a standard where type of query, where the documents are just being returned to you in not any particular order. But I'm going to show you a demo of that as well. And in the latest release of MarkLogic, we also started to support bitemporality, which is very good for financial organizations, and we have features such as flexible replication and incremental backups as well. So why single-page applications? With a single-page application, who here has ever read or used a single-page application? Okay, so you know what it is, essentially. But the good thing with single-page applications, especially when it comes to JavaScript, is that you can now create your whole application stack using one programming language, right? So you can write JavaScript at the back end, you can write JavaScript at the front end, and they are all communicating via JSON. So I think this is a very powerful feature of single-page application. Single-page applications also have a single entry point, right? So you load a particular template, which is the sort of boilerplate or the shell of your application, and then the only thing that changes are the views, right? So it's not using as much data as a standard website would. So hypothetically, what you have is a database such as MarkLogic, where you store JSON documents in the database. Then on top of that, you build something using, and this is the demo I'm going to show you, you use Node.js and Express together to build something that gathers these JSON documents from the database and then displays them or does something with them. And then, well, actually, if you want, you can replace Express and Node with a more purposeful libraries such as Happy, which is Happy.js is a library to create RESTful web service endpoints using Node. For those of you who don't know, you all know what Node.js is. Okay, do you know what Express is? Okay, so for those of you who don't know what Express is just a purpose-built HTTP web server for Node. So it allows you to create a web server, configure routes, cookies, etc., etc. So you have this sort of backend part of your code, and then you can add the front-end framework on top of that. I'm going to use Angular here. You can use Backbone, Ember, whichever front-end framework that you like. And again, the power is that these front-end frameworks are all written in JavaScript, therefore can work very well with JSON data objects. Right? So you have the same programming language all over the place and the same data type as well. Okay, so time for the demo. Excuse me. And I was thinking that, I'm in Sweden. What kind of demo should I do to you guys? And I was thinking, and I thought, okay, it has to be something, really Swedish, really unique that everyone can relate to. And then I realized it's Zlatan. No, I'm only kidding. So I thought of making an application that, stereotypes, that is going to load some documents in your database about some Norse or Nordic gods, and then we're going to display that in the front end. That's simple enough. So now let's go into the live coding bit, which is going to be interesting, but hopefully everything works. So first of all, can you tell me if you can read that more or less? Is that large enough? Text size? Cool. Before we get to that, actually, I just want to show you the data that I have. So I have this set of images that I've collected from the internet about the various gods, and some JSON documents, which I won't open now, but you will see their content. Okay, so there's about 8 or 9 of them. And I'm going to make 2 assumptions here. The first one is that you have MarcoJig already installed, so the database is up and running, and you have the admin user setup and everything else. And I'm going to use the query console. So the query console is MarcoJig's primary interface to view the data in the database and write some code to interact with that data. And you can see I have this query type drop down there where you can select which language you want to use, xQuery, JavaScript, or Sparkle. So we're going to use JavaScript. And in this query console, you can write standard JavaScript as well as utilize the methods that we have created. Okay, so for example, this file system directory method does not exist in standard JavaScript. So this is a MarcoJig specific JavaScript function that very simply takes a path to a folder on the file system, and it's going to print out information about those files. So I get the file name, the path, and some additional information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert these documents into the database itself. And what I would like you to notice is that in that folder, I have JSON documents and image documents as well. And I'm not going to do anything special to load those in. I'm just going to simply tell MarcoJig, here are the files, load them into the database. So if you work with any other database before, you know that when it comes to storing images, you either store the name of the image and then upload the image to the server, and then you have the link between these 2 things, or you have to create a binary stream of your image and then store that as a blob format or something else, right? So I'm not going to do any of that here. I'm very simply going to take this files variable that I have created. I have to create an array of these objects that function returns, and there's a helper function in MarcoJig that we have created called toArray. And once it's an array, I can use the standard for each JavaScript function to iterate through these individual elements, and I call another MarcoJig specific function called documentLoad, which accepts 2 parameters. The first one is the actual path for the individual files, and then I'm also assigning a URI for these individual documents. And the URI in MarcoJig is what uniquely identifies the documents. So you can think of it as a sort of primary key, right, in an RDBMS world. And the URI of these documents is going to start with /nosecodes followed by the actual file name. So for example, I can't pronounce it, dugger.jpg and then border.json, so on and so forth. So I'm going to hit run. I get this message inserted, printed out, and now if I hit explore in the content source, then you will see that I've inserted all these documents to the database. right? So I have this image file inserted, and I also have the JSON document inserted. Okay, the JSON document has this format. It has a name property, a description property, and a detail property with some text. Okay, so far so good. Now notice that you can also see the formats of these documents. So you can see this B, I'm not sure how visible that is. That means that that file in the database is a binary file, and this other file is a JSON object file. And notice there's this fourth column here called collections. So if you work with NoSQL databases, you know that you can assign documents to collections. It's like a logical way of organizing your documents. You can, I don't want to say it, but you can kind of think of these as tables in a relational world. So I haven't assigned these documents to any collections, but I can do that again using the query console and just writing some very basic JavaScript. There's this MarkLogic specific function again called fn.collection, which essentially opens up the individual documents and shows the content of them. So you can see that these two binary documents, then a JSON document, and just lists all of them. Interestingly enough, the fn collection function returns an iterable object. So when we implemented the JavaScript, the server-side JavaScript in MarkLogic, we took the ES6 specification into consideration as well. So because this returns an iterable object, I can also use the for of loop, which is again an ES6 specification of JavaScript, and I'm iterating through all these individual documents, and I say if the document type is an object, then I would like that document to be part of a collection called document biography and bio. I just made those up. Otherwise, else if that's an image, I want it to be part of the image and the binary collections. Okay, so I'm just going to update the collection information for these documents. So if I hit run, done, hit explore again, and you can see that now the JSON documents belong to those three collections and the images belong to those other two collections. And now I can specify a collection, such as biography, and just open the documents that belong to that one particular collection. Okay, so these are all the JSON documents that I have. And I talked about search as well, which is I think one of the most important or most interesting features of MarkLogic. So there's a very simple function called cts.search where you can specify a particular term that you want to search for. And I'm looking for the term Thor. I hit run, and you will see that I have like a bunch of documents returned that match the keyword Thor. But interestingly enough, if I do this, you will see that the first document has a lot of has the keyword appearing a lot of times. And if I keep on scrolling, let's have a look at the last document, you can see that the keyword there only appears once. So this is what I meant by relevancy. So we believe that the first document is the most relevant to this search because it contains the most amount of keywords, keyword matches. Now, of course, there's a really complicated algorithm behind it. I just make it sound very simple. As part of the search, we also utilize something that is called stemming. Who knows what stemming is? Okay, so stemming essentially means that we take an inflated version of a verb or a word and we produce its root form. So something like mice would stem back to mouse, tables would stem back to table, ran would stem back to run. Okay? So in light of that, if I do a search for a keyword throws, hit run, and if I look for an actual match in the documents, you will see that I don't find any. That is because we utilize stemming as part of our search. So, oops, through appears in one of the documents, and in the other document I think we have thrown appearing, right? So this is how stemming would work conceptually. And of course you can do some more specific searches as well. There are some additional functions or methods that you can utilize in the CTS namespace, such as this JSON property word query, where you specify the property and then the keyword that you're looking for. So we're looking for the term Odin in the documents where the name property contains that term, and then of course there's only one document that we have. And here's another example where we're looking for the term Odin in the detailed property, and when we hit search we get again a bunch of documents. And again, these ones are ranked according to relevancy. So you can see that the term Odin appears a lot more in the detailed property in here than in this last document. It only prints once. Okay. So we loaded the documents in, and I'm going to start off a very simple Node application. And the design is going to be terrible, right? So there's no CSS, nothing involved. Again, the assumption that I'm making here, just to save us some time, is that we have this boilerplate code here. So this is a very standard app.js file, an entry file for a Node application that is set up to run Express, so it specify the port name and a very basic root configuration on line 22 that tells the Express web server that if someone hits the root endpoint of the application, it should then render an index file, which is in a JTemplate. Essentially just think of it as an HTML file, which contains this h1 tag, all here, the noscodes. So the very first thing that we need to do is, of course, connect to our database, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to create a variable, which is going to be a standard object, where we specify the connection details to the MarkLogic database itself. So we have a host, which is very simply localhost. We have a port, which is 5060. Then we have, of course, a username, which is admin, and we have a password, which is admin as well. And this Node.js client API that we have has been registered as an NPM package. So if you've used Node before, then you know what NPM packages are. If you haven't, an NPM package is essentially just a library that developers can create, and then you can install those, and you can use them in your Node application. So what I'm going to do, just declare a MarkLogic variable. I'm going to require that package or that library called MarkLogic. And then I'm going to connect to the database, which is going to be marklogic.create database client, and I'm passing in the connection details. So that's the connection information that I've set up. So with these two steps, I'm connecting to my database, and I need another variable called query builder, which is going to help me to build some queries to retrieve the data from the database. Okay, that's all we need. Now, the application itself that we're going to put together is going to be very, very simple. So we're going to have 3 endpoints. The first one is going to list all the data from the database. The second endpoint is going to list one particular document from the database, and then we're going to have a third endpoint to show or to display the images from the database. So in light of that, we have to set up the routes accordingly. And in Express, you do the root configuration by calling this router, the root method, and then we specify the route, so it should be something like API/codes. And then this is an HTTP get method, so we say get. And in Express, you have to specify a callback that would handle this particular route, so I'm going to call that list all. So that's a function name, which means that now I have to specify that function and specify what this function should actually do. Now, callbacks in Express must have the request and the response parameters, so you have to specify that. And in this function, I'm just going to query for all the documents that belong to the biography collection. And I can do that by calling db.documents, and then there's a query method here. And using the query builder, I can build up a query. And I'm really keeping this simple. I'm going to give you some links to our documentation where you can see how complex queries you can build. So I want to retrieve all the documents where the collection is bio. So that was one of the collections that we have created. And then once that finishes, and all our methods inside the Node.js client API return promises, JavaScript promises, if you work with those. If you haven't, we can talk about that after. I just don't want to spend lots of time explaining what those are. So once this query returns, I would have access to these documents, and very simply, I just send back a JSON response that contains these documents. So let me save that. Hopefully that still runs. And I'm just going to test this endpoint. I use Postman. You can use any other tool to test the endpoint. So I go to localhost 8080/API/codes, and nothing is being returned. In the
top.
It's 5060 localhost admin create database.
The property name is post.
Thank you. I was expecting it to be a semicolon, but this is better because there's always a semicolon that's missing. Okay, excellent. So now I get all the documents returned from the database. So you can see that there's a URI property, so the actual URI of the document, some additional information, content type, format, etc. And then the actual content would be the content of the documents themselves. Okay, so far so good. Let's also create another endpoint, which should be /API/codes, followed by a parameter name. And the parameter inside Express is denoted by this character here. And I would obviously have this as a get method again, and then pass in the callback, which is list1. And now we have to specify what list1 should be doing. Again, we have to have a request and a response. Now in Express, you can access the parameters by using the request parameter. So something like request.params followed by the name of the parameter, which is now name. And if you remember, I showed you the URIs of the documents, right? So the URIs of the documents are the ones that uniquely identify the individual documents inside a database. And they all started with /NoSQL/ followed by something. So we need to build that up inside our code. So we take another variable called URI, and we just say it should be NoSQL/ followed by the name and .json. And now I can use, instead of querying for all the documents, I can use another method that we have called documents.read, passing the URI, which is that variable, which would then retrieve the actual document from the database. And just send the document back as part of this request. So theoretically, if I do something like this now, then I only get this one single document returned back to me. And as I said, we need another endpoint, which is going to be for the images. So /API/codes/image followed by the name, handled by the display image callback. So let's have a look at how that will work. And there would be something different here, so that's the whole reason why I'm doing this. We can very simply copy this information because that's going to be exactly the same, except instead of a JSON URI, we are looking for JPEG files now. And we can read again the document. But the difference is that now the document that is going to be returned to us is going to have a hexadecimal format. So you see there's actually an array that has a content, that has an object inside that has a content property, and then there's this massive list of hexadecimal numbers, right? Now, I can't really do anything with that. Now, luckily enough, with Node, you can create a binary stream, or you can convert this returned data structure into a binary stream by using the new buffer keyword. So this is converting the content. So I'm converting these numbers to a binary format, and then I'm wanting to return a base 64 encoded string. Okay, and I will show you why I'm doing that in just a second. So the backend component still works. Okay, so I've created a very basic API that goes out to the database and collects JSON documents. So let's have a look at the front end. Okay, and again, I put together a very simple, just an Angular boilerplate. Who here used Angular before? Okay, so a few of you. So for those of you who don't know what it is, very simply, let's just concentrate on these lines. So I'm creating a router configuration. So when you think about the single page applications, the single page application has to also handle your route. Okay, so you have to specify your routing, and all I'm saying here is that when someone is at the root of my application in the browser, then I would like to load a template file, which is views main.jade, which is currently empty, because this is what we're going to implement now. And in Angular, you can also specify controllers for particular routes. So I'm just going to do that. And I'm going to create a controller called Gods controller. And I'm going to add that to my configuration as well. Controller, Gods controller should be handled by a function called Gods controller. So I need to now specify this function. Now, if you work with Angular before, you know what $scope is. If you haven't, think about the $scope as a glue between the controller itself and the view of your application. So $scope is actually a special object inside Angular, so you can attach properties to that object, and then you can access those properties inside your view. So what that means is that if you have something like scope.test with the value hello, inside your main application, you can just what did I call it? Test. You can just call that, and that should print out hello in here, right? So I attach the property inside the controller, and now I access that inside my view. But let's do something more sophisticated than that. There's a built-in Angular service called $HTTP, which very simply allows you to go out to web service endpoints and then either get the data or post data, use these HTTP words. So $http.get/API/gods would then return all the documents from the database, from this endpoint, into my Angular application. And again, just use then response. And just to make sure that this is correct, let's just log out the response in the console. So if I refresh this, open up my console, you can see that I have an object returned, and there's some data with 9 elements, and content, and there are my documents. Okay, so that's very good. So let me create the gods variable, and I'm going to assign response.data to that variable. So now inside my view, theoretically, if I've done this right, I have access to this gods property, and I can iterate through that and print out some data. So I'm going to utilize a directive called ngRepeat. ngRepeat is going to iterate through a particular data set, and it's going to create a list item for every data set that is in my loop. I'm very simply going to say, create a list item for every god in gods, and gods was the property that I attached to the scope, and I would like to just print out the god.content.name, so the name of them. Voila. Okay, so I have the name property listed out from all the documents. So let's make this actually a link. So something like /gods/ followed by the name. Okay, and notice how I'm not sure whether you can see that on the bottom here. You see that the link also starts with a capital letter. And that, of course, is not good, because then our link would break. So very simply, I can apply a built-in Angular filter called lower case, which would then do as suggested. So what we're doing here is, obviously, we created a link, which is /gods followed by the name, but if I click on it, nothing is going to happen. And the reason why nothing is going to happen is because we have to handle that route now from AngularJS as well. So we're going back to the AngularJS configuration here, and we say, when someone goes to /gods/name, and again, I'm using this parameter using the colon character, then I can specify what to do here. So when someone goes to here, I want to load a template URI called views/god, and use a controller, which is going to be god controller now. Again, I'm going to cheat, just copy that, and God controller. And I need to specify what this God controller is doing. And I'm going to use $scope.http again. And because now I have a parameter, I need to use another built-in Angular service called root params. The root params allows me to access the parameters that were sent in as part of the request. So .http get says, actually, we need to get the name of the code, so that's $root params, and then very simple, I just need to reference this parameter here, .name, and then we have /API/gods/ followed by the name. So that is the endpoint that we have built. And then response. And let's just look at the response again, just to make sure that this works. Aha, there's a semicolon one. Excellent. Unexpected token on line 17. Correct. That is indeed unexpected because it should be like that. Okay, so what we have here should be Odin's content, and it is correct. So what we can do now, we can of course create a new property on the scope code and just assign the data to that. And notice how data is actually an array. So it's an array that has one element, so we could assign data 0 to that property just to save some time. And in here, I'm opening up the template file for that root. So very simply we say h2 content.name, and I'm printing out the actual value, and I can print out the other pieces of information that I have. So was it content.description and detail. Description details, maybe. I don't remember. Detailed. Okay, so I have all the text printed out from the database. So on to the last task, which is how do I retrieve the, well, we retrieve the image, but how do I display the image? Because now it's in binary format, right? So what I can do is come back to this controller. I can make another request to the /API/gods/image/ followed by the name. And I will get a response back. I will put that to an image property. So response.data. If I just print out this image for you inside my template, then you will see that this is not really the image that I want, right? So this is the, that was the binary string that I've created. If you remember, using the new buffer, and this is the base64 encoded string. Luckily, there's a data URI format that I can utilize to build up my image from that format. So what I need to do, specify the data URI and tell the HTML file this is a JPEG image that is base64 encoded, followed by the comma, and that's the value for it. And I'm also going to just specify a width of 400 pixels, just to make sure the image doesn't go all over the place. Refresh that, and now I have the image displayed as expected from the database. All the images, theoretically, should be different. And in a nutshell, this is it. Now, I have two more examples to show you, because obviously I can't go through all the various pieces that make up this application, but what we can do, just very quickly show you a few examples that you can do using single-page applications. So a bit more sophisticated example here. This is actually what we teach as part of our Node.js course. We build up an application using Star Wars characters, so displaying the image, some other information on them. Essentially it works exactly the same as the NoSQL one, except it looks a lot prettier. And we've also implemented search. So this is using a relevance ranked search, so you can do a search for Luke and then you get all the matches for the document. You can do more specific search, so look for that term only in the name property and then you get only one result that comes back. Another example that I would like to show you is one that uses geospatial data. So this application uses geospatial data that was extracted from images, so latitude and longitude information, and then we place that onto a Google Maps interface, and then you can do all sorts of interesting things like view the image, go ahead and edit the image that is instantly saved into the database. So for example, this is Washington DC, save, that's immediately saved in the database, and this was a great trip. And I can just save that. And also we have these two search platforms, so we have GeoSearch, where you can draw geospatial components such as a circle, and this would retrieve all the documents that are inside that circle. You can see that the Washington DC one is here that I just updated. And we also have some text search, which works exactly the same way as the Star Wars character one. So did I say trip? And that returns these two documents, apparently. Okay, so back to the slides. How do I make this? Okay, I don't know how to make this. So a few links for you. What I didn't mention is, of course, MarkLogic can be downloaded from our website. When you download it, you get it with a free developer license, so you can use it for free for development purposes. And we have binaries for Windows, various Linux flavors, Macs, as you can see, Solaris. If you're interested on MarkLogic, then all our trainings are for free. So introductory training, the Node.js course, the Java course, they're all for free. When you go to the website, you will see that there's a fee there. We only take that money from your account if you do not attend the training. Okay, so if you attend the training, then no money is taken. I have this Norse codes project on GitHub, so there's a link for you there as well. The character search, so that's the Star Wars application that I showed you, is also available on GitHub, so have a look at that. And we have this sample stack, which I just put in here last minute, as it's our Java reference application. So we use our Java API, various REST calls, and it's an enterprise application that we have put together using MarkLogic. We essentially replicated how Stack Overflow works. So we took Stack Overflow data and we've implemented, voting, logging, etc., using Java and MarkLogic 8. And you can have a look at that. We essentially show you how to do multi-statement transactions and everything else. So if you're interested in that, then please have a look. And I think I am ready for questions. And I was about to pronounce that. Takshe Mike. So that's all I have. So thank you for your Any questions? Yes.
I was wondering about the relevance search from a performance perspective. I mean, how big is the overhead roughly, if you compare it just to some ordinary NoSQL database like Mongo, for example?
Okay, so the question is how well the relevancy ranked search works in MarkLogic, I guess, in terms of performance.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, it's interesting that you brought up Mongo, because Mongo does, when they do they don't actually do a search, they do a where statement, so that's not a search, right? The algorithm that we have in MarkLogic, I haven't seen any performance issues with it. You can, of course, make use of indexes that would help us to, to run your searches faster. And it really depends on what kind of search you're doing and what, documents, what kind of documents you have. Also, we have filtered and unfiltered searches, which means the filtered search would first open up the indexes and then find the matching documents, and then we would open up those documents to even, find better matches. Unfiltered search only uses the indexes, therefore it is a lot faster. So it's really, we give you all the control, and you can, I just showed you a very simple function, but I've seen search functions that are like 400 pages, 400 lines long, right, using these CTS various searches, so, and they perform well as well.
Yes? You understand the search implemented in the database, or is that by default? I mean, when you search for.
Or when I did the inside here.
Yeah, exactly. You had the stemming. Yeah.
Yes.
Why is that implemented by default?
Why? Actually, I don't know. I don't know why it's implemented by default.
Does it work for different languages?
Yes, it does. Actually, Swedish. Let's see. Status. So it works with all the languages that you will see here, and I think Swedish was here. Can you see? Okay, it's not here. I'm sorry. But you can test it as well. So something like, let's open the tab here. So there's a function called cts.stem where you specify the term that you want to stem, you hit run, and then you get the root form of that. And there's a second parameter you can pass in a language code, and let's say Italian, Mangi would be mangiare, right? So language support is there, and we support these languages. I really thought Swedish wasn't there, but maybe it's coming.
Yeah, but nobody speaks Swedish anyway, so it's
Well, I don't. I tried it, tried to say thank you, but you laughed, so I don't know what I said. Yes.
About performance again. If you say that you have like a high traffic database where the actual state of the data doesn't change very much, and let's say that you run the same kind of search queries like over and over again, I mean, is it possible to enable some kind of caching so that you don't?
They are cached. So there are various caches. So we have, I think, 4 types of caches, or 5, and then each of these caches would store different things. So one stores the indexes, one stores the documents in a compressed format, the other one stores the documents in uncompressed format, and we also have caches for the RDF triples, for semantic data. Okay, no more questions? Well, thank you very much for your attention again.
Present for you from their side.
Thank you.
The speaker.
Thank you very much.
Mm.